around almost every Sunday in a different place in Tennessee, Kentucky, or Ohio. And so we enjoy, mostly we go wherever they have good food. And we heard you have good food here. So we enjoy the opportunity to share together. And we have been blessed by your church, your ministry, your team. We were with many of them last weekend at our couples retreat that we do together. Have a great time doing that as well. So here's what I want to do. Stephen said that he couldn't bear to listen to me talk ad nauseum and just go on and on. So I thought that's what I heard you say. So I'm actually not going to talk the whole time. You're going to get to talk. So you're going to get to all play pastor today, and they're going to hope, therefore, that you'll share the offering with everybody. So here's what we're going to do just for fun today is, and you're going to need to speak good and loud so we can all hear each other. I'm going to read two stories in the Gospel of Mark. And they're actually going to sound like they're the same story, but they're not. They're actually a similar thing happens twice. And I'm telling you this in advance so that when I read them, you can be thinking, if I were the guy up there with a microphone, here would be one point, one lesson that I would want to say that we could learn. And then we're going to actually do that. You're actually going to say, here would be something I think we can learn from this. Here's a lesson from these two stories. We're just going to brainstorm all this stuff. You're going to find out that being a preacher is really an easy thing. You just brainstorm all these cool ideas, and then you just share them with your friends on a microphone. And we're just going to talk about all this together as we walk through. So you can just listen to these stories if you want, or if you want to open your Bible or your Bible app. We're going to start in Mark chapter 6. If it matters to you, I'm reading from the New International Version, just happens to be what I had in my car. And let me give a little bit of context, because context matters in the Bible, right? You know, what's the setting for the story? So Jesus has this inner core group of how many people? Anybody know? 12. He's got these 12 disciples, 12 apostles. He just sent them on a short-term missions trip. They all went out 2 by 2 to different towns on a missions trip. They just got back. They're excited about all the things they saw God do through their trip. While that's happening, Jesus faced a significant loss. His cousin named John, we know him as John the Baptist, lost his head. And I don't mean he just went crazy. I mean he literally lost his head. He was executed for his stand on a number of things. Some certain government officials were not real pleased with his moral values, and ultimately they killed him. So Jesus is going through a little bit of mourning. He knows eternity, he knows heaven, he gets all that stuff, but it doesn't mean he doesn't have feelings, and he's wrestling with all of that. That's the context. Mark chapter 6, we're going to pick it up in verse 30. So in 30 it says, the apostles gathered around Jesus, and they reported to him all that they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them, and they ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. By this time it was late in the day, so his disciples came to him. Well, this is a remote place, they said. It's already very late. Send the people away so they can go into the surrounding countryside and villages, find a 7-Eleven, and buy themselves something to eat. But he answered, you give them something to eat. And they said to him, well, that would take more than a half a year's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat? Well, how many loaves do you have? He asked. Go and see. And they found out, and they said 5, and 2 fish. Then Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. And they sat down in groups of hundreds and 50s, and taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, looking up into heaven, he gave thanks, and he broke the loaves. And then he gave them to his disciples to distribute to the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them, and they all ate, and they were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. The number of the men who had eaten was 5,000. Okay, story number 1. Now, we're going to jump ahead 2 chapters, chapter 8. We're just going to read 10 verses out of the beginning of chapter 8, starting in verse 1. It's not the same time. I don't know whether it's weeks later, maybe a couple months later, but it's different. Chapter 8, verse 1. During those days, another large crowd gathered. Since they had nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples to him and said, I have compassion for these people. They've already been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. If I send them home hungry, they'll collapse on the way because some of them have come a long distance. Well, his disciples answered, but where in this remote place can anyone get enough bread to feed them? Well, how many loaves do you have? Jesus asked. 7, they replied. And he told the crowd to sit down on the ground, and when he had taken the 7 loaves and gave thanks, he broke them and gave them to his disciples to distribute to the people, and they did so. And they had a few small fish as well, and he gave thanks for them also, and the disciples told the disciples to distribute them. The people ate and were satisfied. Afterward, the disciples picked up 7 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. About 4,000 were present. And after he sent them away, he got into a boat with his disciples and went into the region of Dalmanutha. All right, 2 stories. Here's your big moment. Y'all want to be a televangelist? You get to play this right now. So, once you share one, you don't get to, I know your personality. Some of you in here will not speak unless you're directly asked to. Others of you would speak first and second and third and fourth, and you would just share it. So if you share an idea, I want you to let some other people share before we come back around to you for another one, all right? So who's going to be brave? Give me one thing that we could learn from these 2 stories. Yeah.
Let your plans be interrupted for the sake of displaying God's glory.
Let your plans be interrupted for the sake of God's glory. Specifically, you see that how?
Displaying God's glory. Like they want to go off to a desolate place, but Jesus, and that is what his soul needs, and that's what his disciples need. But he's saying, hey, I know this is what our plan is, but we are going to stop what we're doing, because if someone comes to you in need, let's stop what we're doing. Let it be an interruption, because we have the opportunity to share God's glory in this moment. Okay, that's excellent. Great start for us. Probably 2 things stand out here, just to summarize. One would be, it's actually a good thing. It's okay to get away alone to recharge sometimes. Retreating is okay, right? Jesus says to the gang, hey, you're tired. Let's get away. We're going to do a little debrief. We're going to do a little retreat. We're going to kind of get our heads back in the game, get our bodies recharged, get our spirits lifted up. That's a good thing to do. So first lesson out of that. But then in the context of that, as you just mentioned, we find these interesting moments where, have you ever been interrupted in what your plans were for the day? Like every day? And Jesus actually rolled with the interruption. He turned it into an opportunity. He could have been bothered because his schedule for the retreat had been mucked up, but he doesn't. He actually rolls with it. I wish that I had a little bit more of that attitude in the interruptions that happen in my day. I'm not always as gracious as Jesus was. So thank you. Great lesson. Good role model in Jesus for that. All right, we got a couple lessons out of the first one already. Someone else. Be brave, yeah.
Something that I noticed is that Jesus spiritually fed them before physically fed them. So I thought that was interesting that the people were more focused about being spiritually fed first before actually being fed.
Okay. All right. So they really cared to get what Jesus was feeding them before they got real food, right? It matters. I think actually you've stumbled on maybe one of the most important parts of this whole story. People want to be around Jesus. Have you noticed this? People want to be, they will go to the wilderness to be close to Jesus. People will not go out where there's nothing to go to church, but they will go where there's Jesus. So they do. They want to hang around. They want to hear what he has to say. It matters to them. It impacts them. So yeah, they'll even go, what? Food? Dinner? Lunch? How did I slip by that one? Because they want to be with Jesus. I wish that more of our churches understood the value of this. People are not real eager in our world today to just be cool and participate in the next Christian club. But they really want to be where Jesus is. They really want to hear what he has to say. They really want to experience what he has to offer. So that's great. Good point. Thanks for seeing the priority of their own hearts in that as we move forward. Hey, excellent. We're cruising. What else? All right, well, that was good. Now, have we exhausted it?
He gave thanks before there was enough.
He gave thanks before there was enough. So there's probably two parts of this, Stephen. Thanks for bringing that up. But one would be an attitude of gratitude, right? That Jesus modeled that for us, that it's important that we pause and be grateful, even when we're not clear how the whole circumstance is going to unfold. Have you had some moments where you weren't real clear about what was going to happen next? Jesus chose a posture of gratefulness. When he's giving thanks, he's actually doing what? Praying, right? And I actually think, maybe I'm stretching this, and you can write letters to my boss if you want, but I think there's a good principle here. Miracles don't happen if they're not started by prayer. I actually don't think that miracles just show up randomly. There's prayer that leads, prayers of gratefulness, prayers of expectation, prayers that lead us to a place of the powerful work of God. So, Stephen, thanks for reminding us both of a heart of gratefulness and thanksgiving and a posture of prayer that leads to the amazing things that God will do. Now we're up to like 4 or 5, 6 lessons so far. What else?
I like it as an illustration of how human the disciples are. Because the second time, it's as though it didn't even occur to them that he could feed the crowd, even though they just saw him feed the crowd.
Yep. Isn't it amazing? It's like deja vu all over again, right? And so how astounding is this story? By the way, people will say the Bible's just all made up. A group of people sat down in a room one night and they came up with this whole Bible. And one of the ways you know that's not true is like if we were writing the Bible and making this creative story, we would not share how stupid we were. All right? But that's what happens here, right? These guys write about this going, oh, hello, we weren't the most intelligent people around. You wonder in the second story, about what point does somebody look at the other and go, this feels familiar? All right? I don't know. And I love that you bring this up because I love that the Bible shows flawed, real, struggling people. Because I is one of them, right? We're part of this support group together, right? It took them twice to see it. Have you had some things where you've had to learn it twice, 3 times, 104 times, right? I just get amazed at myself sometimes at how dense I can be. And yet, do you have any sense that Jesus got ticked off at them? You know, that Jesus looks at them and goes, really? Have you not paid attention at all? Really? A couple weeks ago, we just did this whole thing. We all feasted together. And now you're going to wonder how we're going to pull this off. But he doesn't. He's like, well, what do you have? What do you want? How are we going to do this? Let's figure it out. So I love that they're kind of clueless because I get that. Thanks. What else? Okay. You get bonus points for bringing in other Bible passages. That's excellent. Matthew chapter 6, Jesus tells them, don't be anxious for things in life like what you're going to eat or drink and how you're going to get clothes and all this stuff. If God cares for the things of this earth, the animals and so forth, he's going to take good care of you too. And we find that here. So yes, as was pointed out, these people were willing to go hungry just to be close to Jesus. But Jesus knew that they had needs, right? Jesus knew that eventually their ability to listen would be hindered. Their ability to grow would be hindered if they were still hungry. Jesus takes care of their needs. It's a good model for ministry for us, by the way, too. Have you noticed that people in the world might not be willing to hear the good news that you have? until they understand that you can help them and care for them and the things that are most needed for them. So ultimately, Jesus models that and takes care of their physical needs so that he has an ongoing platform to make a difference in their spiritual needs. Okay, excellent. I'm glad you brought that up, with bonus points for extra passages in the Bible. All right. Anybody else? Wonderful lesson of leadership. Tell me how you see that, Chris.
Jim.
Oh, Jim. Sorry. Yeah, Jim.
The humility of he knew that they didn't learn the lesson. He was able to lean in and graciously be helpful,
Okay.
continue to learn, to lead, and teach them how to learn and turn to God in situations of challenge.
All right. He continues to apprentice them, doesn't he? Each step of the way. Thanks, Jim. What a great example of leadership this is. If it were me and my crew were like not getting it the second time, it's like I want to go, hello, McFly, and just really, maybe I should trade out for a new team. But he doesn't do that at all. Not only does he not do that, but in what Jim just brought up, we find out that actually Jesus leans in and involves them. How amazing is that? This is truly a biblical example of what we would call decentralized leadership, because there is a leader, but the leader empowers, encourages, releases, motivates, helps them to experience the things they need to do. Jesus could have done this all himself, right? Jesus could have just had the thought and a Happy Meal would have appeared on everybody's lap, right? Could have happened. But Jesus doesn't do that. As a matter of fact, he wants everybody to be able to experience what it is to make a difference themselves. So even though he's the power behind it, he actually has them be the ones who carry out the miracle. How amazing is this? So Jesus does that with us all the time. He comes to us and he says, so what do you have? Right? Does he really need what we have in our hands? He doesn't. He made the universe out of nothing, right? So he didn't have to do it this way. But he says, what do you have in your hands? Can I just say for us, there's people in this room, I just guarantee you get a group this size, some of you are sitting here going, I don't really have what it takes to make a difference in God's kingdom. I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I don't have talent enough, I don't have gifts. They talk about spiritual gifts. I must have gone to the bathroom when they were handing them out. I missed that. I got nothing. And Jesus just says, well, what do you have? Because with Jesus, whatever we have is sufficient, right? If you read the other Bible stories that tell these stories, you'll find out that when Jesus said, what do you have? They found there was a kid with his Scooby-Doo lunch pail, okay? And somehow they wrestled food from a kid, right? You try to take food from a kid. But they did. They brought this little kid up. His mom had packed him. We're not talking wonder loaves. When it says 5 loaves, we're talking little loaves like this that were made at the bakery that morning. And small fish, we're not talking big, huge fillets. But in the hands of Jesus, it was enough. In our own hands, whatever we have is never sufficient. In the hands of Jesus, whatever we have is always more than enough. Great principle for life. Great leadership example that Jesus gives. Now we can jump on these guys for like, how slow were they? And that's not wrong. But do you notice what they do? Jesus, can you imagine? Let's just say there's 12 of them. So let's just take you 2 tables, okay? So I'm going to pretend to be Jesus for a moment. You know that's not reality. But let's think of this and just go, hey, y'all come on up here. I'm going to pray. I'm going to break these loaves, and I'm going to hand it to you. So I hand Chris about half a small little loaf. I hand Chris about half a small loaf. Pam. I just keep doing this, right? I've only got 5 loaves. There's not much to go around. And then we've already told all these people to sit down. So can you imagine, like, Jesus hands you this half a loaf and says, all right, go for it. And you're walking toward this group of 50 or 100 people, and you're like, this is a bad idea. This is a really lame thing. I'm going to have enough. I've got this half a loaf. I've got enough for you to have a good bite that you're going to enjoy, you to have a good bite you're going to enjoy, maybe you, and then we're done. And you're all going to, this whole group of 50 or 100 people are going to look at me like I'm insane. Like, why did we even do this? Why did we tease them like this? But as they're doing it, there's more, and there's more, and there's more. So I actually think there's an interesting principle with that as well, that Jesus is teaching them in his leadership. The miracle doesn't come first. Obedience comes first. Obedience comes first. Jesus says, hey, take what I hand you, go to that group. Then the miracle takes place. I would wish I would do really good at obeying if I could see the miracle first. How about you? Right? If I could see the power, if I knew exactly what it was going to be, I could do real fine at obeying. But Jesus doesn't work that way. He's like, hey, there's 10,000 people out here. Remember I just said 5,000 men. Add the women and the kids. I don't know, 10,000 people. Get them in groups. I got 5 little loaves. Here, James, John, Peter. Off you go. And they do it. They do it. And then they see the miracle. Great example of leadership that Jesus is always training his people. He didn't have to do that, but he does. He models it for us. All right, thanks. Anything else you can see in this? We've come up with 8 or 10 different lessons already just out of these 2 stories. Anybody else got to add anything more? Pam?
So he didn't feed them and just take the edge off their hunger till tomorrow when they could go home or whatever. But they were satisfied, which is probably a good amount of food.
Yes.
To be satisfied.
They didn't just get a bite. It says they ate and they were fully satisfied. How amazing is that? When Jesus feeds you, when Jesus takes care of what you need, he doesn't leave you wanting. He leaves you wanting more of him, but he doesn't leave you lacking. All right? How amazing did Jesus do that? And the basketfuls. By the way, there's 2 different words in the original language. I'm not smart enough to know this, but I read somebody who does. And there's 2 words for the baskets that are here. Where it says the 12 basketfuls, they'd be baskets like this, okay? You could have it on the table. There's 12 basketfuls left over. In the second story, there's 7 basketfuls. These are large baskets. You think it's on the floor and it's up this high. There's 7 of those. That's how much food they had left over from this kid's Scooby-Doo lunch pail stuff that he had. I don't know why Jesus did all that. Maybe that was enough for them to package food for on the trips home. Maybe they took it to the food pantry in the towns nearby and blessed the needy people all around them. I don't know how it all played out. I just know this. Jesus doesn't simply give enough. He gives more than enough. When Jesus is involved, it's amazing what takes place. Right? Yeah, Jim?
So, what did the little boy say to his mom when he got home?
What did the little boy say to his mom when he got home? I don't know, but I imagine that he was fully satisfied as well. I doubt his mom believed the story, right? She's like, yeah, no, you didn't. Not really. Tell me the truth. She probably grounded him. All right, anything else out of these? I'll add one other. This might be a stretch, but I think it's true in life. As Stephen mentioned, Jesus, with a thankful heart, prayed before the miracles took place. There's one other thing he did before the miracles took place as well. Between the prayer and the miracle, what happened? Anybody know? He did something with the food. He broke it, right? He broke it. Now, maybe this is a slight stretch, but I think it's a true principle of life. Multiplication, miracles, take place out of brokenness, not out of wholeness. I don't know about you, but I'm a broken person. I've got stuff in my life. I've had stuff in my life. Some of it I deserved, some of it I didn't. Some of it was thrown on me, some of it I brought on myself. We're all broken people. And people will say, can anything good come out of broken people? And I actually say yes. The amazing power of God can come out of our brokenness. As a matter of fact, I don't know that power really comes out of wholeness, comes out of His wholeness, but through our brokenness. And I think we see that in this story. Jesus, full of compassion, used the word compassion in both stories, and He takes brokenness and He makes an amazing difference in the lives of these people. How astounding is that? So see how easy it is? We just came up, we could have expounded on all of these things. We have like 10 or a dozen lessons. You could do a 10-week sermon series just out of these two stories. I want to give you one last point, because I actually cheated. I withheld a part of the story. And I'm going to finish with this. Actually, Brad's with the kids, right? I think we should go another hour or two just to test him and see how well he would do. So, all right, we won't do that to the children. So we get to the end of chapter 8, verse 10, and catch what happens next. They got in a boat. They had fed all these people. They went. The Pharisees, that's the religious leaders, came and they began questioning Jesus. To test him, they asked him for a sign from heaven. This is funny. I just got to tell you, the Bible has funny stuff in it. 10,000 people had just been fed food out of nothing, a kid's lunch pail. And the religious people, the skeptics, though they shouldn't have been, come up and they say, well, could you show us some kind of a powerful sign? He's like, really? Is that how you're... And can I just say, to people that don't want to be convinced about God, it does not matter what happens in front of them or to them. They will not be convinced. And often they're the smartest, most religious people around. That's what they were here. And Jesus sighed deeply and he said, why does this generation ask for a sign? I tell you, I'm not giving you a sign any more than I already have, basically. And he left them. He got back into the boat, crossed the sea. Now, catch this. The disciples had forgotten to bring what? Bread. This is funny too. The disciples forgot to bring bread except for one loaf that they had with them in the boat. Now, Jesus was teaching them, be careful, he warned them. Watch out for the yeast. Yeast is in bread, right? Yeast makes the bread rise, of the yeast of the Pharisees and that of Herod. And they discussed with one another and they said, it is because we have no bread. Now this is hysterical. I did youth ministry for 13 years. This is like a junior high boys Sunday school class where they're not paying attention to the lesson at all because they're talking about who knows what. So somehow somebody forgot to bring bread. Probably Peter. It was always Peter's fault for everything, right? Somebody was supposed to bring lunch and they didn't have lunch. And they actually assumed that Jesus went all passive aggressive on them. That Jesus wouldn't just say, who forgot the lunch? But instead, Jesus would teach them about bread. So he could kind of twist the knife in their back because they didn't bring bread. And they're missing this. He talks about the yeast of Herod and the yeast of the Pharisees. Well, what's the yeast of Herod? Herod was the governmental ruler. It's worldliness. He's like, be careful. Worldliness. You let a little bit of worldliness into your life and into your church, your group, and it will spread. And it will grow big in you like you never thought. And it will ruin you. Or what about the yeast of the Pharisees? What's that? That's religiosity. Be careful with your life. Be careful with your group that you don't just be religious. It'll spread like yeast. It'll rise within you and it will be something terribly unhealthy for you. Watch out for this. He's teaching them a marvelous lesson and they're not even remotely getting it because they think he's going all passive aggressive on them with bread stories because they don't have lunch. This is funny stuff. And Jesus, aware of their discussion, verse 17, he asked them, well, why are you talking about having no bread? Do you still not see or understand? Are your hearts hardened? Do you have eyes but fail to see, ears but fail to hear? And don't you remember when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up? Can you imagine these guys? This is where they do the elevator thing, like, where you refuse to make eye contact with anybody. You look down, you look up, but don't look at any person. Nobody will look at Jesus right now. It's like, how many basketfuls did you have left? It's 12. It's 12. 12. We had 12. We had 12. It was 12. And Jesus isn't done yet. It says, and then, when I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000, how many basketfuls pieces did you pick up? 7. It was 7. It was 7. We had 7 basketfuls left over. And he just looked at them all and he said, do you still not understand? Don't understand what? Quite simply, if Jesus is not present, you're always going to be in a world of trouble. If Jesus isn't present, you don't have enough. If Jesus isn't present, you all aren't sufficient. If Jesus isn't present, you're going to go hungry. But if Jesus is present, you could have thousands of people and you could only have 1 lunch pail and it would be more than enough if Jesus is present. So, you're not the biggest group of Christians in Delaware County. And I just need to tell you all that this church, I don't care what denomination you're part of, I don't care who your leaders are, I don't care what facilities you have, I don't care how much cash you have in the bank or don't. If you're just playing the church game, it's never going to be enough. Ever. But if this is a place of the presence of Jesus, if people walk out of here going, not just that was a nice message or that was good music, but people walk out of here going, I think I encountered Jesus, then actually, like a little boy with a lunch pail, whatever you have in your hands, however big or small you are, whatever place you're at, it's going to be more than enough. It will make all the difference in the world. Jesus takes and uses broken people to be more than satisfying to the needs of the world around us. And he can do that for you. Let me pray over you all. Heavenly Father, I thank you for this group that's here. I would pray that for all of our churches around Kentucky and Ohio and Tennessee, that we wouldn't just be clever churches. We wouldn't be cool churches. I pray that we would be people of obedience to Jesus. We would be people who are willing to just offer to you whatever is in our hands, whatever we have, and that you would take what we have to offer, small that it might be, and you will do powerful, amazing, miraculous things. Not to our credit ever, but always to yours. That you would be lifted high, that people would be changed, that we wouldn't just grow nice churches, we would gather people of transformed lives, people who've been set free, people who have experienced the fullness of life that only Jesus can give. And I pray that Delaware County will be turned upside down for the glory of Jesus and the advancement of the kingdom. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.